Hello and welcome to our Year 1 information meeting. My name's Mrs Brayshaw and I'm the OWL class teacher. I'm going to be talking you through some of the things that you and your child will experience during their time in Year 1. You will find that your child has moved from the early years foundation stage curriculum to the national curriculum. I'm just going to talk you through to start with some of the topics or some of the areas of learning we'll be covering as part of the national curriculum. We'll have a big focus on English and maths in Year 1, but we also introduce the children in more detail to topics including RE, music, PSHE, computing, PE, geography, design and technology, science, art and design, and history. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail later in our presentation. General information. So you will find that in Year 1 we have a change of daily structure. In Year 1 in our school we have a more formalised learning, so you will find your children are not in provision anymore, but they are sitting at desks and working in their books or in groups. We try and make our learning as active and engaging as we can, especially at the start of the year. So we do lots of group work and have lots of brain breaks and movement breaks as and when the children need. Some of the things that we ask you to do as part of your children's learning and to help with their learning is to please try and ensure that they bring their planners and their reading books every day. That allows us to read with the children. That will be with the teachers, TAs, and we've got lots of volunteers that do that. I'll probably mention this a few times, but if you would like to volunteer as a reader, that would be really helpful. Please do come and speak to your children's teachers, and you will need to get a DBS certificate from the office. On a Monday, we change the children's books and we ask the children to stick in a new insert for each week. One of the things that we do in Year 1 is enable the children to be as independent as possible. So on a Monday morning, we pop the inserts out for the children and we help them to stick them in their books to start with. And by the end of the year, they'll be doing that with independence. We write the children's books in their planner and also any notes for their reading, sometimes notes for you to take home as well. In Year 1, we have what we call end of year expectation booklets, and that's where the national curriculum is detailed for English, math and maths, which includes reading and writing. And we send those home at Christmas and at Easter, highlighted with the things that your children has achieved so far in the year. Now, these won't be completed because at Easter we have not covered all of the subjects and all the areas of the curriculum, as we're only partway through the year. At the end of the year, your child will receive a school report, which will cover all of the areas that we have taught during this year. Other general information. Please do come and see us in the morning. Check in with the teacher if needed, or we're always available after school if you want a little bit more time with us. Please do come and speak to us if you've got any concerns, any worries. We're always happy to answer you as best as we can. Lots of information goes out in our newsletter, our weekly newsletter that Mr. Harrison produces each week. So please do check that for updates for your diary and then any other useful information that there may be. We also use our website. Each class has a class page, and there'll be some more about that later in the presentation. And we use our website to share photos of your children during our lessons. There's also lots of other useful information about our curriculum, useful websites, more detailed information about our different subjects and our subject leads, and also the people that your children will be interacting with in school. We also ask that there is named weather appropriate PE in school at all times. What we do is we take the PE kits in at the start of term. We try and keep them in school until half term, and in the last week of half term we'll send them home for a quick wash over the holidays. If we do find any of the PE clothes become dirty for whatever reason during the school term, we will send them home. Please can I request that socks are included in as part of the PE kit, especially during the winter time. Helps with children, especially girls wearing tights, and if we ever need to change our socks from wet playtimes, etc. Please could we ask for long hair to be tied up on PE days and all jewellery to be removed, including earrings. Hedgehogs PE is usually on a Monday, ours on a Tuesday, and squirrels on a Wednesday. What we might need during our time in Year 1. We do ask that the children use book bags and they bring a bag that will fit an A4 piece of paper in for each day. We often use our book bags to send home letters, other bits of information like our phonics newsletters. So it's really helpful if your bag can fit in an A4 piece of paper and then these don't get crumpled on the way home. Here's an example picture of the book bags that we often allow the children to use. It's helpful for us if they can fit in their drawers or on their pegs, just to save a bit of space. We also ask that children bring their water bottles daily, their planner daily, and their coats daily, as we try and get outside as much as possible. Even on a wet day, we'll take the children for a run around outside just to get out some of that energy. Lip balms, more than welcome in school, but please give them staff for hygiene reasons. The staff will keep them in a central place just to allow them to be kept for your child only. Be really helpful for us if you could make a note of regular pickups in the front of the planner. So if it's always grandma on a Tuesday, that's really helpful for us. And if there is any other supply or any other teachers in our class for whatever reason, just so that we've got a note of regular people. If it's a one-off, please do let us know in the morning or by lunchtime via email to the office. After lunchtime, we will be busy teaching, so we might not always get the message. So please do make sure that is in the morning before lunchtime. We also ask that there are no extra bits brought into school, so no toys, no cards, and we ask if we could keep one keyring on the bags at all times, as they become a bit of distraction, and we don't want any toys or anything like that to get lost, as it causes upset children, and that's not something that you guys or ourselves would like. Our daily routine. So in year one, I'm sure you might have noticed we have a very busy routine. I'm just going to talk you through some of the things that would happen in a normal day. So when the children come into school, we have a morning job either out on their tables or up on the board, and that is to allow children to come in between that 8:50 and 9 o'clock time. That is often linked to either the days or weeks previous learning. Sometimes it might be finishing off work from the previous day. So if we've done a colouring activity and they really want to finish their colouring, we'll pop that out. Sometimes it's linked to the maths that we've done previously, accounting activity, or just to recap our previous learning, get those brains ready to learn in the morning. Our first job is usually phonics. We have a supersonic phonics lesson. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Then we will have English, snack time, playtime, maths, guided reading, all squeezed in before lunchtime. In the afternoon, we will usually cover a maths mastery lesson, at least one topic lesson, sometimes two, depending on when our assembly is that day. An assembly either in the morning or at the end of the day. We also try and finish our day with a nice calm story time. First of all, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about phonics. I'm sure you will have seen Mrs. PB's really useful information about phonics from reception. I'm going to talk you through some of the things that we learn in year one. At the moment, we're focusing on our phase 4 phonics, which is our 4-letter words, and moving on to our polysyllabic words, so words like handstand, where there's 2 parts to a word and we put them together and it makes one word. And so some of the words that we'll be covering are CVCC words, that stands for consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant. Words like tent, and then consonant, consonant, vowel, consonants, so words like from. As I say, moving on to 2-syllable words, and we practice writing our captions and sentences. Here's an example of our newsletter. I'm sure lots of you will have received these from reception, so we're not going to send the phase 4 letters home just yet, but once we move on to the basics 5 sounds, which I'll talk about in a moment, we'll be sending home those newsletters and I'll talk you through how useful they can be. Once we've finished our recap of phase 4 sounds, we will be moving on to the basics 5, or what we call phase 5. And in that, we will learn some more versions of the sounds. So you can see here we've got rain, day, and make, with 3 different versions of the A sound. We try and give the children a rule as much as possible. For example, in day, the A sound spelt AY is at the end of the word. And this often happens with our AY spelt words. But unfortunately, words like crayon cause that to be a problem. So we try and tell the children that as much as possible, this is a rule that we can follow, but we often try with all versions of the sound that we have learnt so far, just to check and see which one's the right spelling for me. Towards the end of year 1, we start looking at alternative sounds, so like in head, beach and break, where the EA makes a different pronunciation in each of those words. Again, giving the children rules as much as we can. During our phonics lessons, we also cover the tricky and common exception words. You will see the tricky words on the left separated into each group of sounds that we teach. So in the basics 2, we do the purple ones. The basics 3, we do the blue ones, which your child will have covered in reception. Basics 4, we cover the red words, and the basics 5, we start covering the green words. As part of our phonics lessons, we also cover the Year 1 Common Exception words, which are part of the national curriculum. And as part of our lessons, we teach the children which parts of the word they can sound out, which parts of the words are currently tricky, and look at strategies of how to remember how to read and spell those. Later in the year, we give out some of the Year 1 Common Exception words after Christmas as spellings. Now speak more about spellings a little bit later. One of the things that we encourage children to do when they're in Year 1 is lots of home reading as much as possible. In an endeavour to make reading accessible for all children, the books that the children bring home as their reading book will be at a level that they are secure with when reading. So all of our books are now phonically decodable. You will find that in some of our books there are words that are highlighted with blue underneath, and our little rhyme is, if it's blue, we'll tell you what to do. That may be a word or sound that they've not come across within their phonics teaching so far, so we will tell them what to do. We encourage children to use their phonics finger during our phonics lessons, but also during their reading. So that's something that you can be using at home. So encourage the children to blend and segment all of the words that they're unsure of to help their reading become more fluent. We change books on a Monday. Your child will receive 2 books, a library book and a phonically decodable book. And we encourage you to share the library book and encourage your child to use their phonics sounds to read their phonics books. What we do is try and encourage the children to read their phonics books more than once to help to build up their fluency. So that will help them to practice. One of the little rhymes I use in my class is practice makes perfect. So we try and read with the children at school once during the week. We also would ask you if you could read their phonics book at home as well. If you could make sure that your reading records are signed so we can keep track of children's reading, that would be really helpful as well. At the end of Year 1, there is a Year 1 phonics screening check, which is an expectation from the government. This is nothing to worry about. This is something that we will do throughout the year in order to get your children used to the situation. What the phonics check involves is some phonically decodable words. Some are real words and some are what we call alien words or nonsense nan words. In our daily phonics sessions, we'll practice reading words very regularly. We also include Nonsense Nan. Nonsense Nan is one of the characters from our phonics lessons, and she helps us with those alien words, so those words that are phonically decodable but unfortunately not real words. So as I say, we do lots of practice with the children throughout the year. There's nothing for you to worry about, nothing for your children to worry about, but it is something that we will have to complete in June. If you would like further information on that, please do come and speak to myself or your child's teachers, and we'll give you a bit more information on that nearer the time. So throughout our phonics lessons, as we come across new sounds, we'll be sending home our parent newsletters. These are a really useful way of practicing phonics with your child. So what we say is, we know that children are often tired at the end of the day. If you find that that's not a good time for you guys to read, that's absolutely fine. Some people find before bed is great. Some people find that by that point their children are too tired. So try in the morning. If you're finding it difficult to get your child to read at home, we completely understand. One of the things that I would recommend is using the parent newsletter. This comes with the previous sounds that we've learned, the tricky words, some of the words that we've been reading in class or will be reading that week, and it can be a nice short, sharp burst of reading practice for your child. You'll find this section showing you the previous sounds that the child has learned. So this is the Basics 4 newsletter, so it shows you the sounds in the Basics 2 and the Basics 3. There are also the tricky words just here. So Chess's tricky words, top ones there are the ones that the children have previously learned, and the ones underneath Tricky Tess are the ones that we have been practicing this week. You'll find on the bottom half of the sheet words that the children will be reading this week, some captions and some sentences. And then finally, on the bottom of the sheet, there are some challenges, and that's again another really fun way of engaging your children with their reading. Again, lots of making up stories, lots of really fun activities. You'll also find that on your children's class play page, and if you search the terms within this presentation, there are some tricky word songs and other activities that will really help your child with their phonics. Now onto reading in year 1. Your child will be doing lots of reading throughout the day, but we also have specific sessions where your children will be doing individual reading. That'll be with the teacher, teaching assistant and volunteers. We do guided reading, so 3 times a week we do whole class guided reading, focusing on the comprehensions of text, and I'll speak about those a little bit more in a few more slides. And during our phonics lessons, we do whole class reading. We also ask small groups to read words, and we'll also ask individual children, if they're feeling confident, to read some of the words through them. Also, through our topic lessons and through our reading lessons, we also get the children to be as independent as possible within their reading, giving them help where they need it for tricky words or words they haven't covered just yet. Guided reading happens in 3 times a week, so on a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday we do guided reading, which is structured into 3 parts. We do this as a whole class. We have a fantastics focus, which focuses on feelings, actions, etc. I'll talk a little bit more about the fantastics when I move on to our English and our writing. We also focus on the stylistics, so we look at the problems in the story, we talk about the characters, and then we look at the analytics, which focus on some of the inference, so why are the characters in the story feeling like this? We also look at grammar and other sentence structures within our guided reading as well. So we call it book talk because in year 1 we do lots of talking. On a Monday and a Friday we do paired reading, so we encourage the children to read their phonically decodable book to each other while the teacher listens to children read, and that can be a really positive environment because the children feel less pressured. They can also help each other out, and we encourage a lot of teamwork and friendship in those sessions as well. They've worked really well for us in the last year. Here's an example of one of the books that we'll be covering over the next few weeks. It's called Misha Makes Friends. During our guided reading sessions, we choose high quality texts, so the children may not be able to decode all of the words in the text, but we focus more on the contents of the story, the characters' feelings, what might happen next, some of the sentence structure, some of the meanings of the words as well. So here's some examples of some of the questions that we might have. So the teacher would read the text, sometimes read the question first, depending on what the question is. Sometimes they read the question afterwards. So this is, can you imagine what Misha will be thinking on this page? We'll give the children a sentence starter. I think Misha will be thinking. And we'll give some examples. The children will talk to their talk partners, and then we feed back as a whole class. Here's another example, thinking about small problems or big problems. Sometimes with our guided reading, we also give the children like a multiple choice, and as we move towards the end of year 1, we give them some of the examples that would come up in some of the year 2 questions as well. Again, we always give the children a sentence starter, give them some options and help the children structure their answers within a sentence. Another example of some of the questions that we would have in our final section. So some tips for how we share books at home. We encourage reading to be fun and enjoyable at all times. So we do lots of reading in school and we try and make it a fun activity. One of my tips from earlier, choose your moment. A couple of pages at a time is fine. Please don't feel like you need to read the whole book all at once. If you've got through 1 page, brilliant. If that's all you're managing that day, do not worry about it. If that's too tricky, as I say, look back at the phonics newsletters, have a go at some games on the internet, watch the tricky words video, anything that you can find that will engage your children and try and make it as fun. Reading really should not be a chore, should be a fun activity. Again, talking about the stories, is it a fiction story, is it a non-fiction story? It's one of the things that we talk about a lot during our guided reading sessions, and we give the children examples of how to spot whether it is fiction or how to spot whether it is non-fiction. We also encourage our children, as I said previously, to use their following finger or their phonics finger to follow along the words, help them sound out where needed. We also encourage to read a wide range of books. So we cover a wide range of books in our guided reading sessions. We try and link those to our topics, which I'll talk about more later in the presentation. We also look at the front cover, we look at the pictures, we discuss the illustrations, talk about the titles, the author, really get involved in our book talk. Now moving on to writing. One of the big things that we focus on in year one is correct letter formation. In year one, we use precursive letters, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second and give you some more examples. One of our other big focuses is writing sentences with a capital letter, finger spaces and full stops. That's our big focus in the autumn term. As we come to spring and summer term, we look at using question marks, exclamation marks, making our sentences a little bit more detailed, a little bit longer. And throughout the year, we use our phonics skills for our writing. So as I mentioned previously in our phonics, currently we know that A sound spelt AI. So if all words with A sound are spelt AI, that is brilliant. We haven't taught them the other ways to spell the sounds just yet, so we don't worry about whether they're using them or whether they're not. What I do is when I'm modelling on the board, I will use the correct sound, and if the children start using that in their writing, that's fantastic, but it's not something that we worry about until we've taught that sound. And as we've taught the alternative sounds later on in the year, if they're using a version of the A sound and their word is phonetically decodable, that's what we're asking for in our year one. Further information about our handwriting style. So we use precursive handwriting style, which means all of our lowercase letters start from the line, as you can see in the picture below. They have a leading line and an exit stroke. This is so that the children, as they get towards year two, will start to be able to join. That for some children is appropriate at the end of year one, sometimes halfway through year one. What we do is we work with the children and let them start to join when they're ready. Our big focus is correct pencil grip. We use nip, flip and grip as demonstrated in these posters. We encourage the children to write on the lines and form our letters in the correct direction. Lowercase f, g and j and y are looped ready for joining, and we move toward joining, as I say, when the children are ready. We teach our writing through a program called The Write Stuff, a style of teaching that makes the mechanics of writing easier for children to learn. So we start our lessons with discussion, we create a word bank, we model a sentence, and then the children write their independent sentence. When we get to our big writing stage, we plan together, the children will write and edit at the end of each unit of work. One of our units coming up is about the Smeds and the Smoos. So we use the story as an inspiration. We'll write a guided piece of writing together. For the Smeds and the Smooths, we'll be writing a description of Janet, one of the aliens altogether. And then at the end of the unit, for their independent piece, the children will be creating their own alien and then writing a description of their own alien. So the skills that they've built up within their guided sessions are then used within their independent piece of work. Throughout our English lessons, we have what we call experience days. That's where we really immerse ourselves in the text. We also have sessions focused on grammar and punctuation to give those children those skills for when they're writing in their independent writing. Another thing we're introducing this year is independent writing books, so the children will get chances throughout the year to have a go at writing completely independently. They can choose something of their own. We will also provide the children with some inspiration, a stimulus. So that might be a picture, that might be a story starter, to really get the children to show off what they can do when they're writing. Moving on now to maths. In maths, we teach through a maths mastery approach, which I'll talk you through as we go through the next 3 slides. Our maths mastery is focused on three parts to a lesson, or 3 parts to our learning. We start with the concrete, so children have the opportunity to use manipulatives, to use objects, so that could be cubes, that could be counters. Got some more examples as the slides progress. Then we look at pictorial representations. So in this picture here, you can see a bar model, and you can see that one part, the yellow part, shows 55. We show the whole as 150, and the question mark shows the rest of the number. Now these numbers are bigger than numbers that we'll be working in year one, but it acts as a good example of what a pictorial representation is, basically showing our maths through pictures. And then we move on to the abstract, and that's where we look at our what you may know as sums. We call them number sentences, or as we move through school, equations, where we've got the digits and the numerals showing our number working. So we start off nice and physical, And then as we move through the year and as we move through our sessions, we lead the children towards a more abstract way of thinking, as well as making sure that their understanding is really deep. This is our maths class. These characters crop up in our maths lessons to help us with our maths learning. We've got lots of different characters there. Teacher Mrs. Smith and our little friend Tiny. Tiny is our maths tortoise. Tiny helps us lots with our maths lessons and helps guide us through problem solving activities. Tiny always has a go at our problems, but unfortunately for Tiny, sometimes he gets them not quite right, but we use that as a stimulus to get the children talking about the maths, identifying some of the problems and really reasoning out their answers. So as part of our maths mastery, it's not just about the fluency, about knowing what 5 is. We go deeper than that. We know that 5 is made up as 3 and 2. We know that 5 looks like 5 spots on a dice. We know that when we're counting, we can go 4, 5, 6. We know we can start with 5, and then we take that on to learning things like counting in 5s. So we try and make sure that children have a really deep understanding of maths, and this is based on ways from Singapore, and it's the way that we've been teaching maths for about the last 10 years. It's filtered through and we're now getting really confident with our teaching of maths mastery. So now I'm going to talk you through a typical year 1 maths lesson. We start off each lesson with what we call a flashback 4. This is 4 questions and an additional bonus question that recap our previous lessons learning. So question 1 is focused on the day before, question 2 the week before, question 3 I believe is the topic before, and then question 4 is a instant recall fact, so one of the things that we come back to regularly in year 1. We then start each session by getting our brains ready to learn by practicing some of our instant recall facts. So there's some of the ways that we learn about numbers. At the moment, our learning is focused on place value. So lots of our instant recall facts are focused on either our previous lessons work or information about numbers. So for example, things like we're going to start with a number 5. Can you tell me one more than 5? Can you tell me one less than 5? As we move through the year and we start learning about counting in 2s, 5s and 10s, we also insert that into our instant recall fact lessons, practicing counting in 2s to 20, in 5s to 50 and in 10s to 100. We do that forwards and backwards. We start from different numbers. We try and make these as interactive as possible, really getting our brains ready for our new learning. We then have a STEM sentence which introduces the children to their new learning. Following that, we do an in focus, which is where we look at the new learning together. We then let's practice, that's let's practice together. Sometimes we'll do some practical work, let's practice by ourselves, followed by some independent work. Now, sometimes that independent work is practical using objects, and sometimes that is a worksheet in our book or an interactive worksheet. Following that, the children have a now try and a problem solving activity, which I will show you some examples of in a moment. During each week, we have what we call chili challenges, and they're extra challenges to motivate children that are confident in their independent work, they've had a go at their problem solving, and these chili challenges just challenge that learning a little bit more, really get their brains working. As I say, we have 3 levels of chili challenge. Mild chili challenge, our spicy chili challenge and our extra hot chili challenge, and they'll be focused on the week's learning or the previous week's learning. So here's an example of our in focus. The question will be led by the teacher, can each bird have a worm? Sometimes that'll be a turn, talk and tell, have a little chat about it with your partner. Sometimes we'll ask the children depending on the focus of the lesson. We'll then model, this bird has a worm, 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 and this bird has a worm. Have a think. There are not enough worms. Each bird cannot have a worm. And often we'll repeat those sentences together just to really embed that learning. Then we've got a let's practice. Can each bird have a worm? So same question, different birds, different worms. We then give them a structured sentence. There are something birds and something words. The children will then repeat that back to us using the answers. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 birds and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 worms. I'm just whizzing through this. I'm quite sure that most of you can count to 6 and count to 4. Each bird cannot have a worm. Here's some examples of our independent work. So this lesson would be focused on one more. Here you've got some pictures. The children have to write one more at the end. Then they've got a now try. Again, this is not necessarily related to the same lesson. To now try and write the number in numerals, what we call the number shape, a number in words, on a number track, and then within a sentence. So it's just to structure that learning with that extra step. And here's an example of a problem solving question. Here's our favourite Tiny. Tiny is counting to 10. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, 10. What mistakes has Tiny made? And that's where we really get deep into our mastery of number and our really deep understanding of maths, giving the children full confidence before we move on to larger numbers or different types of maths. So our mastery approach looks at numbers as a really deep cycle rather than going, right, we just need bigger numbers. Here we can see that Tiny has mixed up 4 and 5 and he's missed out 9. So it's getting the children to see why Tiny is wrong, what mistakes has he made, and how we can help him. Again, just bringing in that helping our friends, really supporting and working as a team. Our instant recall facts, as I briefly mentioned before, more examples. Some of these things are expectations by the end of year 1. So we build slowly to counting to and across 100. That will be within the summer term. At the moment, we're just focused on numbers to 10 so that we can get a really deep understanding of those numbers, how those numbers are made up, how we get to our number bonds, what we can say one more and less than. And once the children can do that confidently to 10, then we get to 20, that becomes much easier. Then we get to 50, that becomes much easier. And then by the time we get to 100, hopefully with that good secure foundation, the children will be really confident counting to and across 100 at the end of the year. Again, saying one more than less, we start off with numbers to 10, numbers to 20, numbers to 50, and so forth. Talks about counting in multiples of 2s, 5s, and 10s, and that leads as a base for their learning in year 2, which moves on to multiplication. We look at our number bonds to 10, starting off with our number bonds to 5 and building up to our number bonds to 10. So that's where pairs of numbers will make 10. For example, 2 and 8 makes 10. So therefore, as we build our learning to larger numbers as we move to year 2, we then know that 20 and 80 make 100. Using our number bonds, so again, pairs of numbers and related subtraction facts within 20. So we start off with addition to 10, build that up to addition to 20, and again do subtraction in the same way. Here are some of the objects that we would use in a maths lesson. You can see the children in the picture using a 10 frame and some cubes. We often use coloured counters with 10 frames, so they're red on one side, yellow on the other. This 10 frame at the bottom here shows 5 red counters and 1 yellow counter, so we know that 5 and 1 is 6. We use number tracks. This number track has numerals, words, and a pictorial representation. Here, as we move through the year, we start using base 10, which is what these blue blocks are called. Long blocks represent 10 and the small cubes represent 1. In the cartoon picture, you can see a big block and that represents 100. And that is something that we move on to later in year 10. We've also got some part-part models and a tens and ones chart. We often use equipment to make our maths as hands-on as possible. Here we've got some Numicon, we've got a Reckon Rec, and we've got 100 Square. We have chosen not to include all the things we use in maths, as we would be here for many, many slides. We use all sorts of different objects, pictures, etc. to try and inspire our children and really embed all of that lovely learning. A few other bits that you might need to know in year 1, and we'll be sending home a newsletter covering what we'll be covering in the autumn term. You've also got your child's class page, links through here. If you go onto the website, you can quite easily find the children's class page, and that will have our current learning, hopefully some photos. One of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute is permissions for photos. So once we've got those all through, we'll be able to add more pictures onto our class pages. We've obviously also got our Instagram account as well. So just before I go through that, we teach our topic learning in the afternoon and some of our learning in our English lessons and our guided reading through our topics. So in autumn 1, we do Happy Me. Autumn 2, we look at celebrations. In spring, we start learning about animals in fur, feather and fins. Spring 2, we use inspirational people as our stimulus. Then we move on to nurturing nature, and to finish off our year, we have one more step. All of our learning is taught through our mantra, nurtured and inspired equals happy. You can find more information about our topics on our topic page, and that will show you the things that we cover in each of our topics throughout the year. If you've got any questions, please do direct yourself to your class teacher. Please pop and see us, as I've said, in the morning, or pop and see us after school. Some of the other bits that I would like to mention is through Arbor, which is our registration system. We would like you to sign up to the app. It'd be really useful for us. We can then send through notifications. So if our PE day has changed for whatever reason, we can notify you of that with notification rather than send you a formal email to tell you of a small change. That way it saves any worries, any concerns. It can just be a quick reminder for yourselves. So if you could all sign up to the Arbor app, that would be really helpful. Also within the Arbor app, please could you check the permissions for your child's photo to be taken. We ask for permission for the website and for Instagram, so we can put your children's up to share their learning with yourselves and both with other prospective parents. One other thing I'd like to mention, if you feel that you've got any skills that you would like to share with us, we would really welcome that. As I've mentioned before, we welcome people to read with our children. If you can do it on a regular basis, brilliant. If that's something that you can't do but you would like to contribute, please do speak to your teachers. If you see any learning in our planners, on our newsletters, and think, oh, actually I've got some knowledge about that, come and do a talk, we would really appreciate that. Later in the year, we'll be doing some sewing. So we'll be looking for anyone that is willing to come and help us with our sewing lessons, threading needles, helping the children with their basic skills. Anything like that, please do get in touch with us. I know Mr. Harrison would welcome that as well. Mr. Harrison has also asked me to ask for PTA volunteers. He's got lots of amazing ideas for the PTA to raise some funds for, makes contributions for, which he'll be talking about in the PTA meeting within the next couple of weeks. Please do speak to him, as I say, or your class reps. I know we've got some class reps already. They'll be full of information, and that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and as I've said multiple times, please do come and see us if you've got any questions. Thank you so much. Just before I go, list of useful websites here. Phonics Play, great fun practicing phonics. Numbots will set your children up with a Numbots login in the next few weeks. The Numbots account is for children to practice their numbers at home. If you've got older children, you might have come across Times Tables Rockstars. It's a very similar thing. The children get to practice their instant recall facts, practice their basic math skills, earn some coins, and get to make their own wonderful robot. They absolutely love it. It's really highly recommended. Also, if you come across the website Top Marks, that's got lots and lots of teaching resources, interactive activities, games, exam helps if you've got little older children. It's fantastic. A couple of the other bits that we use in class is Super Movers. Look, we use them a lot for brain breaks. We also use them to teach our Spanish. We learn Spanish in year 1. And we also use them for movement breaks in maths. Lots of quick counting games there. Some about English and grammar and things like that as well. And finally, I mentioned Bite Size. BBC Bite Size is fantastic, covers all the topics. Sometimes there's little videos there, little interactive activities. So if your child's got a real interest in something that we've done in school, you'll probably find something there. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again soon.